Welcome to the world of science fiction where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. Ethan Vance adjusted his tie nervously as he glanced at his apartment's smart display. It was Thursday, cleaning day, and he had recently switched from a local service to an interstellar one after hearing rave reviews about their efficiency. He wasn't sure what to expect, but had been assured that their employees were highly professional. The chime of the door startled him out of his thoughts. "Open door," he commanded softly. The door slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing his new cleaning assistant. She was unlike anything he had imagined. A tall figure with shimmering teal skin that seemed almost luminescent under the apartment lights. Her eyes were an iridescent gold that flickered faintly like candlelight. She wore a simple uniform that hugged her athletic frame, but looked slightly disheveled. "Mr. Vance?" she asked hesitantly, her melodic voice carrying an accent he couldn't place. "Yes," he replied quickly. "You must be Lyra," she said with a small nod before stepping inside. As she moved past him into the living room, he caught a faint scent, something like lavender mixed with starlight. Ethan frowned slightly as he noticed how unsteady she seemed on her feet. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked cautiously. Lyra froze mid-step, gripping the edge of his couch for support. "I apologize," she murmured. "I shouldn't have come today." Concerned, Ethan stepped closer but stopped when she flinched slightly at his approach. "What's wrong? You look like you're about to collapse." Lyra hesitated before sinking onto the couch with a sigh. Her hands trembled as she reached for a pendant around her neck, a crystal that pulsed faintly with light. "It's complicated," she said finally. "And embarrassing." Ethan sat down across from her, keeping his tone gentle. "You can tell me." She took a deep breath before meeting his gaze directly. "I'm experiencing my species mating cycle." Ethan blinked in surprise but didn't interrupt as she continued. "Every 7 years, she explained softly, adult Valerans enter this phase where our empathic abilities intensify dramatically. We're drawn toward those we formed emotional connections with, whether we want to be or not." Her fingers brushed against the glowing crystal at her neck. "This pendant amplifies those emotions during the cycle. It reveals bonds we might not even be aware of." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "And you came here. Why?" Lyra hesitated again before whispering, "Because I couldn't stay away." The weight of those words hung heavily in the air between them. "I've been trying to ignore it," she admitted quietly, "trying to remain professional. But being near you makes it impossible." Ethan felt his heart race as he processed what she was saying. He had noticed how Thursdays had become his favorite day of the week, how he looked forward to seeing who would show up next. But this was something else entirely. "Lyra," he began carefully. "No," she interrupted quickly, standing up abruptly despite how shaky she still seemed. "This is inappropriate. I shouldn't have said anything." She moved toward her cleaning supplies but stumbled slightly again. Instinctively, Ethan reached out to steady her, and froze when their skin touched. A visible shiver ran through her entire body as the pendant flared brighter than ever. "I'm sorry," she whispered hoarsely, pulling away from him as if burned by the contact. Ethan stepped back cautiously but didn't take his eyes off her. "Talk to me," he said softly. Lyra sank back onto the couch again with trembling hands clutching her pendant tightly. "You don't understand what this means," she said finally. "Then help me understand," Ethan replied firmly. For what felt like an eternity, neither of them spoke, but when Lyra finally looked up at him again with those glowing golden eyes, filled with emotion too complex for words, he knew there was no turning back now. The story had only just begun. Lyra stared at Ethan, her golden eyes filled with a mix of vulnerability and trepidation. "You need to understand what you're offering," she repeated softly. "The cycle bond. It's not just attraction or even love. It's deeper than that, more permanent. If I, she trailed off, unable to articulate the full scope of what she was contemplating. "There's no going back," Ethan finished for her, his voice steady. Maybe I don't want to go back. He paused, considering his next words carefully. Maybe I'm tired of pretending Thursdays aren't the highlight of my week. Maybe I want to know everything about you and your culture, and why that pendant glows, and what a cycle bond really means. A small sound escaped Lyra's throat, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. You're making this impossible, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Every word you say, every emotion you project, it's like fire in my veins. Then stop fighting it, Ethan suggested gently. Stop trying to maintain professional boundaries that we both know aren't really there anymore. Talk to me. Help me understand. For a long moment, Lyra stood perfectly still, her internal struggle visible in every line of her body. Then, slowly, she nodded. All right, she said softly. But first, I need you to understand exactly what you're getting into. The cycle, the bond, my culture. There's so much you need to know. I'm listening, Ethan said, gesturing towards the couch. We have all day. As they sat down together, careful to maintain a small distance between them, the pendant's glow settled into a steady, warm pulse around them. The cleaning equipment remained silent, as if holding its breath along with them for whatever would come next. Lyra took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. Valoran society is structured, she began carefully. We value order and emotional control above all else. The mating cycle is a natural part of our biology, but it's also seen as a disruption, a temporary lapse in judgment. To embrace it, to form a bond during this time, it's considered reckless. Why? Ethan asked, his brow furrowed. Because of the empathic connection, Lyra explained. Valorans are naturally empathic, but during the cycle, that ability intensifies exponentially. A bond formed during this time is irreversible. We become intrinsically linked to the other person's emotions, thoughts, and even physical sensations. It's a profound merging of two beings. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. That sounds intense. Lyra nodded somberly. It is. And cross-species bonds are even more complicated. Our cultures, our biology, our ways of thinking. They're all so different. It's difficult enough for two Valorans to navigate the complexities of a cycle bond, let alone someone from another species. So what you're saying is, if we were to form a bond, we'd be facing a lot of challenges, Ethan summarized. More than you can imagine, Lyra confirmed. My family, they wouldn't understand. They would see it as a betrayal of our traditions, a reckless act driven by hormones. I could be ostracized. But what if it's worth it? Ethan asked, his gaze locking with hers. What if the connection we have is strong enough to overcome those challenges? Lyra looked away, her expression conflicted. I don't know, she admitted. I've never experienced anything like this before. I've always been reserved, cautious. The cycle has amplified emotions I didn't even know I was capable of feeling. As Lyra was opening up to Ethan and divulging more about her people, her past, and the cycle, Ethan heard a knock at his penthouse door. Who could be here? Ethan said, confused and annoyed by the interruption. Ethan then used his AI assistant to check who was at the door. It's Captain Renard. Mom. Lyra's eyes widened in shock, and she suddenly stood up as if she had seen a ghost. Captain Renard. What's he doing here? Lyra whispered, her voice laced with panic. Who is Captain Renard? Ethan asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Before Lyra could respond, the door slid open, revealing a stern-looking Valoran male in a crisp military-style uniform. His eyes were sharp and assessing, and he carried an air of authority that commanded respect. Lyra, he said, his voice deep and resonant. I've come to take you home. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at Captain Renard, her mentor and commanding officer from the Valoran Interstellar Corps. His unexpected arrival filled her with a mixture of relief and dread. Captain, she said, her voice barely a whisper. What are you doing here? Renard's gaze swept over her, taking in her disheveled appearance, and the faintly glowing pendant around her neck. His expression hardened. I receive reports of your unusual behavior. It seems you've allowed your personal feelings to compromise your professional duties. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself protectively between Lyra and Renar. Who are you? And what do you mean? Take her home. Renar turned his attention to Ethan, his eyes narrowing. I am Captain Renar of the Valoran Interstellar Corps. Lyra is under my command. She is experiencing her mating cycle, a highly sensitive time for our species. It's imperative that she returns to Valora immediately. She's not going anywhere, Ethan said firmly. She's a guest in my home. Renar chuckled humorlessly. A guest, or a distraction. Mr. Vance, I understand the allure of the cycle can be intoxicating, even for humans. But you must realize that Lyra's well-being is at stake. Staying here is dangerous for her, for both of you. Lyra stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's arm. Captain, please, she pleaded. I'm fine. I can handle this. Reinar's expression softened slightly as he looked at Lyra. I know you think you can, Lyra. But the cycle, it clouds your judgment. You're not thinking clearly. He turned back to Ethan, his voice imploring. Mr. Vance, I urge you to reconsider. Let her come with me. It's the best thing for everyone involved. Ethan hesitated, torn between his desire to protect Lyra and his respect for her wishes. He looked at Lyra, seeking guidance. Lyra's eyes met his, conveying a silent plea. I need to explain something to you, she said softly. Something I haven't told you yet. She turned to Renar, her voice firm. Captain, please give us a moment alone. I promise I'll make a decision soon. Renar hesitated for a moment before nodding curtly. Very well, but don't take too long. Time is of the essence. He stepped outside, leaving Ethan and Lyra alone. Ethan turned to Lyra, his expression filled with concern. What is it? What haven't you told me? Lyra took a deep breath, bracing herself for what she was about to reveal. There's a reason why the Corps sent Captain Renar, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It's not just because of the cycle, it's because of my empathic abilities. What do you mean? Ethan asked, his brow furrowed. I'm a rare type of empath, Lyra explained. My abilities are stronger than most Valorans. I can sense emotions from vast distances, even across different star systems. And during the cycle, my powers amplify to an almost uncontrollable level. Ethan's eyes widened in understanding. So, you're saying, someone wants to exploit your abilities? Lyra nodded somberly. There are groups out there who would do anything to get their hands on an empath like me. They would use my powers for their own gain, regardless of the consequences. Ethan's expression hardened. And you think they're after you now? Lyra nodded again. I've been receiving coded messages, subtle hints that someone is watching me, tracking my movements. That's why Captain Renar is so worried. He knows the risks. A sudden surge of protectiveness washed over Ethan. He couldn't let anything happen to Lyra. Not now, not ever. Then we're not going to let them get you, he said firmly. We'll face them together. Lyra's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Ethan, her heart swelling with gratitude, and something else, something that felt dangerously close to love. You don't understand what you're up against, she whispered. These people are ruthless. They won't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way. Then we'll be ready for them, Ethan said, his voice resolute. I may not have any special powers, but I'm not helpless. I'll do whatever it takes to protect you. As Ethan and Lyra stood together, united against an unknown enemy, the pendant between them glowed brighter than ever, sealing their bond in a silent promise of loyalty and love. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but they were ready to face it together, no matter what the cost. The air in Ethan's penthouse crackled with tension. Outside, Captain Renar was likely growing impatient, unaware of the new threat looming over them. Inside, Lyra's emotions were a tempest, swirling with fear, guilt, and a growing sense of desperation. "They're going to come for you," Ethan said, his voice grim. "And we need to be ready." Lyra shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "You don't understand what these people are capable of. They're not like anything you've ever encountered." "Then tell me," Ethan urged. "Help me understand." Lyra hesitated, then began to explain. "They're called the Shadow Syndicate," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They're a clandestine organization that specializes in acquiring and exploiting rare alien abilities. They operate in the shadows, using intimidation, bribery, and violence to get what they want." "And they want you because of your empathic powers," Ethan surmised. Lyra nodded. "My abilities are unique. I can sense emotions from vast distances, manipulate them, even control them to some extent. The Syndicate wants to use me as a weapon, to turn my empathy into a tool for their nefarious purposes." Ethan's expression hardened. "We can't let that happen." "But how can we stop them?" Lyra asked, her voice laced with despair. "They have resources, connections. They're everywhere." "We have something they don't," Ethan said, his gaze locking with hers. "We have each other." He reached out, gently taking her hand in his. The contact sent a jolt of energy through both of them, strengthening the bond that had formed between them. "I may not have any special powers," Ethan said, "but I'm not helpless. I know this city, I know how to navigate the shadows, and I'm not afraid to fight for what's right." Lyra's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Ethan, her heart swelling with gratitude and admiration. "You would risk your life for me," she whispered. "Without hesitation," Ethan replied, his voice firm. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the penthouse. They both whirled around, their eyes scanning the room for the source of the noise. "They're here," Lyra said, her voice filled with dread. A figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the light with a menacing grin. He was tall and muscular, with cold, calculating eyes and a cybernetic arm that gleamed ominously. "Hello, Lyra," he said, his voice a low growl. "We've been expecting you." "Agent Dax," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "I should have known they would send you." Dax chuckled. "You're a valuable asset, Lyra. The Syndicate isn't going to let you slip through their fingers that easily." He turned his attention to Ethan, his eyes narrowing. "And who is this?" "Your human pet." "He's my friend," Lyra said, her voice defiant. "And he's not afraid of you." Dax laughed again. "Brave words. But bravery won't save you from what's coming." He raised his cybernetic arm, aiming a weapon directly at Lyra. "Come with me quietly, and maybe I'll let your little friend live." "I don't think so," Ethan said, stepping in front of Lyra protectively. Without hesitation, Dax fired a blast of energy at Ethan. Lyra cried out in alarm, but Ethan reacted quickly, diving out of the way just in time. "Run, Lyra," Ethan shouted. "Get out of here." Lyra hesitated for a moment, torn between her desire to protect Ethan and her need to escape. But she knew that staying would only put him in more danger. "I'll find you," she said, her voice barely audible. "Just stay alive." With that, she turned and fled, disappearing into the labyrinthine corridors of Ethan's penthouse. Ethan faced Dax alone, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew he was outmatched, but he refused to back down. "You're making a mistake," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly. "You don't know who you're messing with." "Oh, I think I do," Dax said, his grin widening. "You're just a pathetic human, trying to play hero. But you're no match for the Syndicate." He fired another blast of energy at Ethan, who dodged again, narrowly avoiding being hit. Ethan knew he couldn't keep this up for long. He needed to find a way to turn the tables, to use his knowledge of the penthouse to his advantage. As Dax advanced, Ethan led him through a series of narrow hallways and concealed passages, using his smart home technology to create distractions and obstacles. He activated holographic projections, triggered alarms, and even released a swarm of cleaning drones to harass Dax. But Dax was relentless, his cybernetic arm allowing him to overcome every obstacle with ease. He was like a machine, programmed to hunt down Lyra and bring her back to the Syndicate. Finally, Ethan led Dax to a dead end, a small windowless room at the back of the penthouse. He knew it was a risky move, but he had no other choice. "Nowhere left to run, human," Dax said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. Ethan stood his ground, his eyes fixed on Dax's. "Maybe not," he said, "but I'm not going down without a fight." He lunged at Dax, throwing a punch with all his might. Dax easily dodged the blow and retaliated with a swift kick to Ethan's stomach. Ethan doubled over in pain, gasping for air. Dax grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off the ground with ease. "Any last words?" Dax sneered. Ethan struggled to speak, his vision blurring. "Lyra, escape." Dax tightened his grip, cutting off Ethan's air supply. Just when Ethan thought he was about to lose consciousness, a sudden blast of energy struck Dax from behind. Dax released Ethan, staggering backward in surprise. He turned to see Lyra standing behind him, her hands glowing with a faint energy. "Get away from him," Lyra shouted, her voice filled with rage. Dax chuckled. "So you decided to come back. How touching." He lunged at Lyra, but she was ready for him. She unleashed a barrage of empathic attacks, bombarding Dax with waves of fear, pain, and confusion. Dax cried out in agony, clutching his head with his hands. He stumbled backward, his cybernetic arm sparking and malfunctioning. Lyra pressed her advantage, continuing her assault until Dax finally collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Ethan watched in amazement as Lyra used her powers to defeat Dax. He had never seen anything like it before. "Are you okay?" Lyra asked, rushing to Ethan's side. Ethan nodded, still gasping for air. "I'm fine," he said. "But how did you do that?" "I used my empathy to overwhelm his mind," Lyra explained. "It's not something I like to do, but I had no choice." They knew they couldn't stay in the penthouse any longer. The Syndicate would send more agents, and they would be even more ruthless. "We need to get out of here," Ethan said. Now, they fled the penthouse, making their way to the streets of the city. They knew they were being hunted, but they were determined to stay one step ahead of their pursuers. As they ran, Lyra's pendant began to glow uncontrollably, signaling that their emotional connection was reaching its peak. She warned Ethan that if they didn't separate soon, the bond would become irreversible, but Ethan refused to leave her side. He knew that their connection was something special, something worth fighting for. As they continued their flight, they realized that they weren't just running from the Syndicate. They were running towards something as well, a future where they could be together, freed from fear and oppression. The pursuit had begun, and they had no idea where it would lead them. But they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, as long as they had each other. They fled the penthouse, running through the crowded streets of the city, trying to lose Agent Dax and any other Syndicate pursuers. Lyra's pendant pulsed erratically, reflecting her inner turmoil. The weight of what she had revealed to Ethan, the danger she had brought to his doorstep, and the undeniable connection between them weighed heavily on her. "We need to find a safe place," Ethan said, his voice tight with urgency. "Somewhere we can regroup and figure out our next move." Lyra shook her head. "There is no safe place. The Syndicate's reach is far and wide. They have eyes and ears everywhere." "Then we'll just have to be smarter than them," Ethan said, his determination unwavering. "I know this city. I know places where they won't think to look." He led her through a maze of back alleys and hidden passages, using his knowledge of the city's underbelly to evade their pursuers. Finally, they arrived at a dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of the city. "This is it," Ethan said, unlocking the heavy metal door. "It's not much, but it's the best I could come up with on short notice." The warehouse was dark and dusty, filled with forgotten machinery and discarded junk. but it offered them a temporary respite from the chaos outside. "Thank you," Lyra said softly, her eyes filled with gratitude. "For everything." "Don't mention it," Ethan said, his gaze locking with hers. "We're in this together, remember." As they caught their breath, Lyra's pendant began to glow even more intensely. She gasped, clutching at her chest. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with concern. "The bond," Lyra said, her voice strained. "It's getting stronger. I can feel your emotions, your thoughts. It's overwhelming." "Is that bad?" Ethan asked, his brow furrowed. "It means we're running out of time," Lyra said. "If we don't separate soon, the bond will become irreversible. We'll be linked together for life." Ethan hesitated. "And that's something you don't want." Lyra looked away, her expression conflicted. "It's not that I don't want it," she said. "It's just, I don't know if it's the right thing to do. We're from different worlds, different cultures. A bond like this, it could destroy us both. Or it could save us," Ethan countered, his voice firm. "Maybe we're meant to be together, Lyra. Maybe this bond is a sign." Lyra shook her head. "You're being blinded by the cycle," she said. "It's amplifying your emotions, making you see things that aren't really there." "And maybe you're being blinded by your fear," Ethan retorted. "Maybe you're so afraid of what could happen that you're not willing to take a chance." Their argument was interrupted by a sudden crash from outside the warehouse. They both froze, their eyes wide with alarm. "They found us," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with dread. Ethan grabbed a nearby metal pipe, his heart pounding in his chest. "Get behind me," he said. "I'll protect you." The warehouse door burst open, and Agent Dax strode in, his cybernetic arm gleaming menacingly. "Hello, lovebirds," Dax said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I see you found yourselves a cozy little hideaway." "Get out of here, Dax," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly. "This doesn't concern you." Dax laughed. "Everything concerns me. Lyra belongs to the Syndicate, and anyone who gets in our way is going to pay the price." He lunged at Ethan, swinging his cybernetic arm with incredible force. Ethan dodged the blow, narrowly avoiding being crushed. He swung the metal pipe at Dax, but Dax easily deflected the attack. Lyra watched in horror as Ethan and Dax fought, her mind racing. She knew that Ethan was no match for Dax's cybernetic enhancements. She had to do something, but she was afraid of using her powers. She didn't want to hurt anyone, but she couldn't stand by and watch Ethan get killed. Summoning all her courage, Lyra unleashed her empathic abilities, targeting Dax with waves of fear and pain. Dax cried out in agony, clutching his head with his hands. He stumbled backward, his cybernetic arm malfunctioning. Ethan seized the opportunity, swinging the metal pipe with all his might. He struck Dax in the head, sending him crashing to the ground. Unconscious, Lyra rushed to Ethan's side, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" she asked. Ethan nodded, still catching his breath. "I'm fine," he said, "but I don't think he'll be bothering us again anytime soon." As they caught their breath, they realized that the fight had taken a toll on Lyra's pendant. It was cracked and damaged, its glow flickering weakly. "Oh no," Lyra said, her voice filled with dismay. "The pendant, it's broken." Ethan examined the pendant closely. "Can it be fixed?" he asked. Lyra shook her head. "It's a family heirloom," she said. "It's irreplaceable." As she spoke, the pendant shattered completely, its fragments scattering across the floor. A wave of energy surged through Lyra and Ethan, knocking them both off their feet. When they regained their senses, they realized that something had changed. The bond between them was stronger than ever, more intense and more profound. "What happened?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with awe. "The pendant," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "It was acting as a buffer, limiting the strength of our bond. Now that it's gone, there's nothing holding us back." They looked at each other, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and excitement. They knew that their lives had changed forever. The bond between them was now irreversible, a permanent link that would bind them together for eternity. "So, what do we do now?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra took a deep breath, her expression resolute. "We run," she said. "We run as far away from the syndicate as we can. We find a place where we can be together, where we can be safe." They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but they were determined to face it together. They were bound by a connection that transcended space and time, a bond forged in fire. As they prepared to leave the warehouse, they knew that they were leaving their old lives behind. They were embarking on a journey into the unknown, a journey that would test their limits and challenge their beliefs. But they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, as long as they had each other. Their bond had reached its zenith. The journey continues for the two lovers. They burst from the warehouse into the cool night air, the city lights blurring around them. Adrenaline coursed through their veins as they raced toward an uncertain future. "Where do we go?" Ethan asked, his voice tight with urgency. "Away from here," Lyra said, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "As far away as possible." They made their way to a hidden garage where Ethan kept a sleek, black motorcycle. He revved the engine, the roar echoing through the empty streets. "Hold on tight," he said, his voice barely audible above the noise. Lyra wrapped her arms around him, her body pressed against his. They sped off into the night, leaving the city behind them. As they rode, Lyra's mind raced with possibilities. She knew that they couldn't outrun the syndicate forever. They would need a plan, a strategy to protect themselves. "We need to go to Velora," she said, her voice firm. "My home planet. It's the only place where we'll be safe." Ethan hesitated. "Velora? But you said your people wouldn't approve of our bond." "I know," Lyra said, her voice filled with determination. "But it's the only chance we have. My family may not understand, but they won't let the syndicate harm me on our own soil. There we can ask the Elder Council for asylum." He nodded, his expression resolute. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll go to Velora." The journey to Velora was long and arduous. They traveled through bustling spaceports, quiet space stations, and desolate asteroid fields. They dodged syndicate patrols, evaded bounty hunters, and outsmarted corrupt officials. During their travels, their bond deepened. They learned to anticipate each other's thoughts, to feel each other's emotions. They became inseparable, two halves of a whole. Finally, after weeks of traveling, they arrived at the edge of Valoran space. Lyra guided Ethan through the complex security protocols, using her knowledge of Valoran technology to bypass the defenses. As they entered the atmosphere, Lyra gazed out the window, her eyes filling with tears. It had been years since she had last seen her home planet. "We're here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The ship landed in a secluded clearing, far from any major cities or settlements. Lyra led Ethan through the dense forests, guiding him toward a hidden village where her family lived. As they approached the village, they were met by a group of Valoran warriors, armed and ready for battle. Lyra stepped forward, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I have returned home." The warriors lowered their weapons, their expressions softening as they recognized her. They led her and Ethan to the center of the village, where Lyra's parents were waiting. Her parents rushed forward, embracing her tightly. They were overjoyed to see her, but their joy was tempered by concern. "Lyra, what's going on?" her mother asked, her voice filled with worry. "We heard rumors that you were being hunted by the syndicate." "It's true," Lyra said. "They want to exploit my empathic abilities." She turned to Ethan, taking his hand in hers. "This is Ethan," she said. "He's my bondmate. He helped me escape from the syndicate." Her parents' eyes widened in surprise. They looked at Ethan with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "A human?" her father asked, his voice tinged with disapproval. "You formed a bond with a human." "It wasn't planned," Lyra said. "It just happened. But I know in my heart that it's right." Her parents exchanged a look, their faces unreadable. They led Lyra and Ethan to their home, a small but cozy dwelling made of wood and stone. As they sat down, Lyra explained everything that had happened. She told them about the syndicate, about Agent Dax, and about the bond that she had formed with Ethan. Her parents listened in silence, their expressions growing more and more somber. When she had finished, her father spoke. "This is a serious matter, Lyra," he said. "Cross-species bonds are rare enough as it is, but to form one during the mating cycle, it's almost unheard of. The Elder Council will not approve." "Then we'll convince them," Lyra said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll show them that our bond is genuine." The next day, Lyra and Ethan were summoned to appear before the Elder Council. The council was made up of the most respected and influential members of Valoran society. They were wise, experienced, and deeply committed to preserving Valoran traditions. As Lyra and Ethan entered the council chamber, they were met with a sea of stern faces. The Elder Council regarded them with suspicion and disapproval. "Lyra," Elder Thaler, the leader of the council, began, "you have brought great dishonor upon your family and our people. Forming a bond with a human is a reckless and irresponsible act." "With all due respect, Elder Thaler," Lyra said, her voice clear and strong, "I did not choose to form this bond. It was the will of the cycle, and I believe that it is a good thing." "Good?" Elder Thaler scoffed. "How can it be good? You have defied our traditions, rejected our values. You have brought shame upon us all." "I have done nothing to be ashamed of," Lyra said, her voice rising. "I have followed my heart. I have found love and happiness, and I will not apologize for that." Ethan stepped forward, placing a hand on Lyra's arm. "I know that I am an outsider," he said. "I know that I don't understand your ways, but I love Lyra with all my heart, and I will do everything in my power to protect her." The Elder Council regarded them in silence, their faces unreadable. Finally, Elder Thaler spoke. "We have heard your words," he said. "We have seen the bond that exists between you. But we cannot simply ignore our traditions. We must test you to see if your bond is truly genuine." "What kind of test?" Lyra asked, her voice filled with apprehension. "We will subject you to a series of trials," Elder Thaler said. "Trials that will test your strength, your courage, and your love for each other. If you pass these trials, then we will accept your bond. If you fail, then you must leave Valora and never return." Lyra and Ethan exchanged a look. They knew that the trials would be difficult, but they were willing to do whatever it took to be together. "We accept your challenge," Lyra said, her voice resolute. The trials began immediately. Lyra and Ethan were subjected to a series of physical and mental challenges. They had to climb treacherous mountains, cross raging rivers, and solve complex puzzles. They faced each challenge with courage and determination, relying on their skills, their wits, and their love for each other. As they progressed through the trials, the Elder Council began to see the strength of their bond. They saw the way Lyra and Ethan supported each other, the way they anticipated each other's needs, and the way they faced danger together. Finally, after weeks of grueling trials, Lyra and Ethan reached the final challenge. They were brought before the Elder Council, where they were presented with a difficult choice. "You have proven your strength and your courage," Elder Thaler said. "But now you must prove your love. You must choose between your own happiness and the well-being of our people." He explained that Lyra's empathic powers were needed to protect Valora from an impending threat, but using her powers would put her in great danger, possibly even cost her her life. "If you choose to use your powers, you will save our people," Elder Thaler said. "But you may never be able to live a normal life. You may never be able to be with Ethan." Lyra and Ethan looked at each other, their hearts filled with anguish. They knew that they had to make a difficult decision, one that would determine their future. After a long moment of silence, Lyra spoke. "I will do whatever it takes to protect our people," she said, "even if it means sacrificing my own happiness." Ethan stepped forward, taking her hand in his. "Then we'll face it together," he said. "We'll protect Valora, no matter the cost." Lyra and Ethan joined forces, using their combined powers to repel the impending threat. They fought with courage and determination, pushing themselves to their limits. In the end, they succeeded in saving Valora. But the battle took a heavy toll on Lyra. She was weakened and exhausted, her empathic powers drained. As she lay recovering, Ethan stayed by her side, tending to her every need. He knew that she had made a great sacrifice, and he was determined to make her happy. When Lyra had fully recovered, she and Ethan were summoned before the Elder Council once again. The council members regarded them with respect and admiration. "You have proven your love and your loyalty," Elder Thaler said. "You have saved our people. We accept your bond. You are now both members of our community." Lyra and Ethan embraced, their hearts filled with joy. They had overcome every obstacle, faced every challenge, and proven that their love was stronger than anything. From that day forward, Lyra and Ethan lived happily on Valora, surrounded by their family and friends. They built a life together, filled with love, laughter, and adventure. They never forgot the challenges they had faced or the sacrifices they had made. But they knew that their bond was worth it, that their love was a gift that they would cherish forever. And so, the story of Lyra and Ethan, the alien maid and the human who dared to love her, became a legend on Valora, a testament to the power of love and the strength of the human spirit.